Yes. Vishal's screen is important.
Yes, your screen is visible now.
I can also see there. It's still on gallery mode, I guess.
Yes,
Your Jitsi.
I have switched it.
Okay, okay. And okay, then just F11 and we are good to go. I'm clicking on go live then. Okay, we are live. Hello everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for joining Python Pune Meetup July edition. If you are joining, please post in the chat. Maybe you can introduce yourself, your name, and all, so that we have a conversation kind of feeling. Few housekeeping stuff. All the talks are going to be recorded. So if you have any queries, comments, and any thoughts, please post those on the YouTube chat. And also make sure you follow the code of conduct. This applies to the video as well as the chat and any other communication media. So let me start with the do in every month. We have come up with a new what I can say a format where we will first talk about the newsletter we have. We'll kind of discuss one or two topics from the newsletter, and then what we will do is we'll switch to the talks and we'll discuss about those and we'll have question and answers as we every time have. So we'll start with newsletter discussion. I have Chandan and Vishal with me. Hello Chandan and Vishal.
Hi, Bhavin. Hi,
Hi,
Vishal.
Bhavin.
Yeah, maybe
Yes.
Chandan, you can start with your screen and you had some topic to discuss, right?
Yep. So, can you make sure the YouTube stream is working fine?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I can see. I can see it's working fine.
Okay.
I can
Give
see
me a
my
minute.
mouse moving.
Can you see my terminal?
Yes, I can see your screen at
Okay.
first.
So, right now I'm saying the newsletter, showing the newsletter.
Yeah, I can see.
Is that
Stream is
okay?
fine, I guess. I
Yeah.
can see the stream, but someone is saying nothing is there. Give me a minute, I will quickly check and we'll continue.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then your is visible on the live stream. Cool. We
Okay.
don't have to worry now. Yep. Yes. Go ahead with the topic. Maybe you can start with the thing you wanted to discuss.
Okay. So, welcome to another edition of Python Pune newsletter. So, as discussed, we are not going through the newsletter. We will try to pick one topic from here. So, today we are going to talk about debugging import errors in your Docker images. So, let me, so,
If you want to start your camera, you can.
yeah, sure. A minute. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
I hope you can see my browser.
Yeah. I can. Continue.
So, can someone pass these links? Like I'm dropping here. Welcome to another edition of Python Pune newsletter.
You need to note it. Yeah, we will share those later, right?
Okay. So,
Yeah, please
so we
continue.
will be talking about this blog specifically. Where is your code and debugging import errors and model not found errors in your Docker images. So, since we are talking about the Docker images and we are talking about the import errors coming from a library which we are importing in Python. So last week you already know that like Python 3, so last beta of Python 3.9 got released. Let's pull the latest container image of Python 3.9. So I will search for Docker Hub Python. So here you can get all the container image related to Python. So I'm going to pull the latest one.
Yeah, for those who don't know what is Docker, so it's basically a way to run processes in isolated way, so that basically you can have your application running on your machine, and it will be like it's running in its own OS, and it will be completely isolated from other processes on your machine itself.
Yeah, nice. The Docker container is built from a Docker file where all the instructions are given, like what is from which image getting built, what are the contents it's coming, what are the commands it's running, and like what is the entry point and in which directory you're going to work on. So a lot of things, like we will come to that later. Let me pull the image first. So you can either use podman docker or like
Right.
podman pull image name and colon, and then you need to pass a tag name.
Maybe then you can increase font size. That will be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
anyway, but so still it pull the image. I also have the images locally. So this is the image which I have already downloaded. So in order to get into the container image, like I need to run it. So what I'm going to do, podman run IT. Let me go at the image ID and pass. Then we are into the Docker image.
Yeah,
Right?
so basically, yeah, let me just quickly tell what happened here. So basically, we used the container image and we started one process in an environment, and we are inside that environment now. Yeah.
So in order to make sure whether Python is there or not, like the simplest way to check is like to run Python 3 command. Okay. So it's Python is there. Like in order to check the version, you can already check that like version is 3.9.0 B5. Let me make the screen a little bigger. Clear?
Yeah, that's good.
You
Yeah.
can also check the version using sys model sys.version. It will also tell you the same information which is highlighted here, like this one. Let me go out from this. You can also check the version using Python -versions. There's another way. So let's check from where this Python 3.9 is coming from. So for finding out from which binary is used, we generally use the which command. So let me type which Python 3. So as you can see here, it's coming from user/user local bin Python 3. But when you go in your local system, there Python generally comes from /user/bin Python 3. Yeah. Yeah. So here we have two types of Python. One is 3.9 installed at a different location, and another is 3.7.3 provided by the system packages, which is
Yeah. So yeah.
already available in the image. Or maybe it happens like when we were installing something, it got pulled by that.
Yeah. So basically, when we say we have a container, sometimes it is based off some operating system. In our case, it is Debian, and Debian also has some Python pre-installed. And then we have the image which has Python as well. So yeah.
So the Ava Python which we have highlighted is coming from the source. So the Ava Python is the latest Python, and it's actually installed via the Docker file, and you can see it like here within the Docker file. They have actually downloaded the tar file from the python.org. Then they run some command, they then configure it, build it, and they try to install it. And they also install pip by using getpip.py script, and they dumped it somewhere. Okay, so let's do next. So next what I am going to do is like, let me back the screen. I have another images. Here I have installed pip from using Python 3 pip from the system package. Give me a minute. Okay. So podman run IT. Okay.
Chandan, sorry to interrupt. Could you please reshare your screen? I guess it's freezed.
It's frozen. Yeah.
Stop sharing.
Usually this doesn't happen. I don't know.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it is visible. Thanks.
Yeah, Vishal, just let us know whenever
Okay.
it freezes for you.
Okay. So right now I am into another container. Okay. So its base is basically Python through. So I have created another container from this Python 3 verster one, from this one, where I have just installed like pip3. So in order to make sure like what is going there, let me show one more thing. So here is the image content which I have built. See here. So I have pulled the Python 3.9 image and then try to update the image and install Python 3 and Python 3 pip,
Okay.
and then I try to commit.
Yeah, so yeah, basically one container where we have Python 3 and Python 3 pip installed. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Clear? So let's come. So here we have /user bin pip3. Okay. I'm going to install something here. Like let's install Flask. Okay. Here. So since we have installed Flask, so I will able to import this like Python 3 -c import Flask, and like let's print something if it's available. Okay, I am there, like something like that. Or let me do something like this, not call like this. Let's do like this. So
Single
it's
quote. Yeah.
yeah, syntax error always happen with this.
Yeah,
So
as we are on
yeah,
command line.
yeah. So we have used -c to pass some arguments so that get executed by the Python interpreter. And here we are seeing import error. So right now, so right now we have installed, see here, /user bin pip3 installed Flask. Okay,
Right.
but I am trying to run by using Python 3 command, like Python 3 -c import Flask and print hey, I am there. But it's
Okay.
giving.
Okay. Let's check where is Python 3, right?
Yes, that's the good question. So let's find out which Python 3. Okay, this one. But and let's check here pip also. Clear? So
Interesting.
so right now, so we have installed /user bin pip3, but the default pip is installed is /user local bin pip3. So that's why when we are trying to do Python 3 -c import Flask print hey, I am there, it's giving import error because this Python 3 is not knowing about Flask.
Yeah, basically some paths are different, and that's why it's not able to find it definitely.
Yeah. So let's do something different here. Like let's do pip3 install request.
Some different module, right?
Yeah, yeah. And okay, cool. Okay, it's there, and like let's try to do let's call this command here. I'm going to change something little bit here. Okay. Okay, cool. The old syntax. And see here, it worked. So
Yeah.
so the main thing we wanted to say that like when you are running a program within a container image, make sure you specify the full path of any command you use.
Yeah.
It might happen that like you have same program but installed at 3 different location or 4 different locations. And
Yeah, that's it.
and so right in this case, in this container image, we have 2 different Python versions. Like Python 3, when we call directly Python 3, it points to 3.9, and when we call /user bin Python 3, it points to Python 3.7. So one other thing to show you that, like, let's suppose like this Python 3.9, I have defined a dictionary 1:2 and B is colon 3:4.
Okay.
So in 3.9, they have introduced a pip where the union of 2 dictionaries is possible. So this is the union sign, and like it works here. Let's do something different here. Let's exit and try /user bin Python 3. Okay, and let's do the same operation here. 3:4. And let's do the union of these two things. Here is like type either. So so by specifying the path, you are also making sure that you are using the correct version of any software, so that you can avoid such kind of import errors. Or you are also making sure that like the code which you have written on your local system by using a specific version of Python, that is actually working there also. Otherwise, you end up with lots of error, and then you will scratch your head, and you will end up like spending most of the time like finding out what's happened.
Yeah.
Another most important thing, like never mix stuffs when you install something from pip, which is coming from. So what I wanted to say that like never install stuffs. Like suppose you have installed request from pip and you are also installing request from a package like Python 3 request. So that time might be both the things are not compatible. That time you also face import error. So that time you also try to specify the Python path like which you are using.
Yeah.
That is what I wanted to say. And you can find all the stuff which we have discussed in this blog.
Yeah, and which is part of our monthly newsletter, which
Okay.
we release every month.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those who don't know what is the newsletter we release, so basically we have one collection issue where everyone from the community posts some links which they find interesting, and then we do the curation part. We collect all those links and we put them as one newsletter. We will be sharing link to this newsletter shortly. Yeah, that's all we had as part of newsletter discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Vishal. Pavan. Handing over.
Yeah, thank you, Chandra.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And next up, we have a talk about PyTest, and it is from our friend Anandprakash. So he's one of the Python Pune member who likes to speak at different conferences, likes to explore stuff and do open source related stuff now and then. So we will be starting with his talk. Maybe Anand, you want to add something? Anand has recorded his talk. So if you have any questions, then just ask them in the chat. And at the end, we will relay those questions to Anand once the talk is over. Vishal, maybe you can start with the video then.
Yes, Bhavan, I am directly playing it on OBS, so you can please let me know if there is any problem in sound or anything.
Yep.
Hello everyone. Welcome you all in this meetup, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm about coming and learning new things, even such situations like lockdown. My name is Anandprakash Tandale, and today I am going to give an overview about effective and efficient use of PyTest framework. So let's start. So first of all, first question which will come in your mind is basically what is framework? So framework is like a software or a program where things or components are used, managed and abstracted in such a way that it will help to fulfill the requirement in a unique way. So in early days, if you remember, we had ball pens and refills. So only specific ball pens in only particular ball pens we can put specific refills. So one of my intelligent friend who actually found out some patent in artificial intelligence and machine learning, he told me a framework is something if you know all in all, inside of that framework, you will get to know how exactly you can efficiently use that framework. So why framework get famous is basically its uniqueness, its easiness. If you understand the communication between different components of that particular framework, and if the framework is fulfilling the unique use cases in its different way, in its different unique way, then definitely a framework will get famous. So today we are talking about PyTest framework. So what is a PyTest? So it's basically a framework for checking Python code written is working fine or not. So it's basically testing whatever you written in Python are working fine or not. We can test any functionality like databases, functionality of APIs, functionality of UI as well. So we can test different functionalities using PyTest. So why PyTest? So it's basically free and open source. We, uh, if you know about free and open source, we can say it's a very powerful tool. Any open source tools are powerful tool because we can tilt it in our way because it's open source. PyTest has simple syntax. It can also help us to execute multiple cases, multiple scenarios in parallel manner, so that we can test the scenarios in very efficient manner. And even we can take easy decisions about the executions, what exactly we need to execute. So that decision will be in our hand if you use PyTest. And of course, time efficiency, as I mentioned. So if you go about PyTest, and if you want to learn about PyTest, first you need to understand what are the prerequisites of PyTest. So first of all, you need to you have to be familiar with Python. Python must be installed, of course, and then you should have PyTest module installed. And PyTest have different modules. So if you want to use that module, you need to install it. So for that, you need to have the knowledge of pip. So, and how you can install is basically pip install PyTest. Pip is nothing but a package management system used to install and manage packages written in Python. Like many packages can be found in different source of packages and their dependency in Python packages indexes, which is PyPI, and pip is a basically acronym of that. So if you install PyTest, pip using pip install PyTest, then you can check whether if you are able to successfully install or not using pytest-h command. So it will give you all the subcommands for the PyTest. Before going to the execution, so one of the important thing here is assert. So many people who are using PyTest are using assert in their code. So it's a very basic, but if you don't know, I can tell you that assertion are it's simply Boolean expressions that's basically checks if the conditions written true or not. If the condition returns true, then program doesn't do anything and move to the next line. However, if it returns false, then definitely program stops and give or throws an error. So that's what assert is work. So many of the PyTest user at the start of their career in Python or PyTest, it's basically they are using assert. So let's go to the execution. So if you see my screen basically, then I can tell you that whether PyTest is installed or not. It's basically my system is Fedora. So if you check which PyTest, my PyTest is add user bin PyTest, PyTest -h. You can see lot of help. Forget about this warning at the start. It's basically a package is there are new packages available and I am having older packages. So there are a lot of sub commands and lot of options you can actually go through explore using pytest. And you can check the version using pytest --- version. So this is my version. So let me go through since basic, because considering wide range of audience here, so we will start with the basic. So here I have written some code, so, and I will execute it, and you will get to know how exactly pytest work and how to execute pytest, how to test your code using pytest. So I have written a very basic code of like arithmetic operations. I am basically writing, I have imported math. I am checking a test equality. I am checking test sqrt square root. I am checking the square. And if you see, basically I am using assert here, assert 10 equal to 11, assert mat dot sqrt, and assert. It's basically checking condition is returning true or false, as I explained in earlier slide. So we have program now how to run it. So let's say pytest we already have, then arithmetic.py, and we can check whether it will work or not. So great, it's working. But now you cannot see a verbose log, what exactly happening over there. You can see there is one failure and there is one green dot. So what exactly happened here, which test is failing, which test is passed? So to know this, you can just add happen vv. So you will get to know that test square function is failed and test sqrt function is passed. And what is a failure here in test square is basically we are checking 7 into 7 is 40, but it's not 40, and we are getting like it's a fail. So that's it. That is a basic execution of pytest. Now uh, let's say I have this code, but in that code I have to execute only a function which actually I want to execute. I don't want to execute all the functions. So pytest provide a functionality of that. So basically we have three functions: test less, test greater, test greater equal. Forget about these comments as of now. We will explain. So here pytest provide one functionality like pytest -k, and using that we can run. So here you can see only a substring, only a function which has executed having the substring of less. So if you check, only the function is less having the substring less is test less. If I put a substring here greater, it should provide me two functions, result of two functions, because we have greater here as well and greater here as well. Okay, so here you can see two tests are running having the substring greater. So -k is an option. If which if you want to run particular tests, particular functions having particular substring, then definitely you can use the option -k. Then we can move to next. Our next option provided by pytest is basically uh, marker. Marker is a something that you can mark, you can label this particular function you need to execute using pytest. So I have written one another code which is a very basic code as well, which is pytest more examples. So you can check, there are like I have imported pytest, I have imported math, and this is the way you can actually mark your code, mark your function. So pytest.mark.square, mark.others, mark.equal. So now I am going to execute pytest -m marker, my marker, let's say square. I have square, and name of the code and verbosity. So here you can see that two tests having where we actually put the marker, they actually run. Forget about these warnings because I am having a older package, so you can check and explore as well about these warnings, but don't need to worry about that warning. So basically whatever the functions we have marked as a square, so you can check here as the square and here the square, so those two functions will actually got executed. So next functionality provided by pytest is basically fixers. So it's like a fixing a particular function which actually get executed every time. So even if you are running any test and different functions, if you put fixer in one particular in front of one particular definition or a function, it will get executed all the time. So let me go through you the example of pytest fixers. So here you can check I have uh, put fixers. I have imported pytest because it's required, and pytest.fixer, and it's the input value, and I am executing the functions like, let's say I will execute like mod, I will execute like divisible, but how exactly those functions will get the value, input value, it's from here, and using pytest it will get it because we have put the fixers. So even if I run this function or I run this function, then it will give the value, input value, and because we put pytest fixer here, so let's run it. So pytest -k mod pytest fixers. So here they are getting the input value. Let's go through the different example, like let's I put here 09 and let's run the function again. So here you can see input value is 109. So even the function is passing or failing, it's basically getting the input value. Fixes are something like you are fixing, you are telling explicitly to the test, to the code, that this particular function I need to get executed every time before running any other function. Okay, so let's go to another functionality provided by pytest, is basically parameterize. If you are running something, some function having the parameters, and at the time of execution, if you need to provide parameters, how exactly you can write? Let's say, let's see. Uh, More examples. So here you can check that I have written the parameters, pytest @pytest.mark parameterize, and this is how I provided pytest. It's basically like a getting the parameters and running and checking the test multiples, whether they are multiples. Asset 5 into number is equal to output or not. So first parameter is number and second is output. And similarly, here in test equal, I am just checking 8 plus number equal to the is greater than 10. So let's execute that. Okay, so pytest hyphen k test multi test any substring pytest more examples dot py and bv. So here you can check test actually executing. Test is able to get the parameters which actually we are not providing inside the function, but we are providing here. We are providing like using parameterized functionality at pytest mark parameterize, and we are providing the parameters. Now let's uh, execute this function. So here you can see the the test is getting function is getting executed. First test is failed because we have provided wrong input over here just to check. Assert 8 plus 2 is greater 10 is greater than 10. No, so it's giving assertion. So that is why we can provide the parameter. So let's go in a scenario. Let's think about the scenario. If you have a code and code having a lot of test functions, and the functions, there are some functions which are not relevant, you don't need to execute in every time. So that time we can use pytest mark xfiles or pytest mark skip. So I think in compare.py I have written this, so I will uncomment this pytest mark xfile. So let's check what exactly happens here. Yes, first function is failed because of the input. Second, it's saying x pass because we've put x fails. So purpose of x fail is basically that uh, it uh, it will get execute, but it won't say in such a manner like it will get pass or fail in green or red, but it will execute. But if you want to completely like skip the function, then we can use uh, skip option. So difference between skip and xfail is basically xfail will get executed, but it won't provide result in green or red. You, or even if you want to generate some result, it won't provide. So I am commenting mark xfail and I am uncommenting skip. So let's check. So here you can check it's skipped. So here they are not giving any result like it's passing or fail, but at the time of x fail they are providing result but prefixing x. So that's the difference between x fails and skip. Uh, so there are some tests and there are a lot of functions and you need to run functions, all the functions, but uh, you need to provide if you want to provide like if out of 10 functions 1 or 2 functions fails, rest of the functions I don't need to execute. So what I need to do is basically I need to use hyphen max fail option. I have already executed, so I will execute it. What exactly it will check? It will check the first function is failing or any failure. For any one failure I will get, I won't execute rest of the function. So right now test less is getting failed. So let's check in compare.py. So you can check test less is failing and rest of the thing is basically not executing. Okay, so next functionality provided by PyTest is basically a very good functionality which is a parallel execution. By default, it's running the test sequentially, but if you want to use if you want to run multiple tests parallelly, then they provide option like -n. So it's like basically a pytest -n, how many let's say how many in different threads you want to run, and program name. So it will execute in three different uh, in parallel manner, but uh, use of parallelism will only helpful for us if the data and function coverage is much larger, and if we need lot of time to execute those functions, then that time in that case it will work. Else if functions are small, data is small, so it won't actually, we are not able to see much difference at that time. Okay, what exactly we need to check now. Now we are checking how exactly we can uh, generate a report. So this is the command actually using which we can run the right, like pytest and -JUnit XML and result one.xml. So we are getting the result in XML format. JUnit XML is one of the like favorite uh, we can say module in lot of frameworks we different people are using, and it helps us to generate XML. So PyTest also provides us, and we can able to execute it. So you can check right now that results has been generated. Okay, we can check. So in XML format we are getting which are failing, which are passing, what are the rest of the metadata, what are the timestamp. So if someone want to like grab the data or manipulate the data of XML, this is the finest way that generating data first in XML format, and we can do operation using this particular file. So this is how we can actually generate XML using -JUnit XML. Okay, so we also have some useful PyTest plugins which actually people are not using. So one of the plugin is PyTest Random, which actually used to randomly run the test. There are a lot of tests, lot of functions, lot of scenarios which you need to test, but some coverage is not there. So if you want to execute a few tests like randomly testing the functionality of the some functions, then pytest random will help. How it will help, I will show you. So here in pytest more examples.py we have a lot of codes, a lot of functions, and what exactly the command is doing, running the function test randomly. So here you can see test equal run at the second time, and if I run the command again, so it will again randomly run the test, and that time we don't we will check that test equal will test at second time or not. So you can check right now, it's checking, it's testing randomly basically. Okay, second one of the useful pytest plugin is coverage, pytest cov. So what exactly we can check here is coverage. If you run particular thing, where the control is going, in which code, in which line, how much it covered, how much percentage. So that command is coverage run -m pytest compare.py. We are checking the coverage of compare.py. So it will take some time. It's executing. So yes, it's executed. Now I need to get actually coverage reports, how exactly I can get is using this command coverage report -m. So here you can check the output, the report, what exactly this is. You will get to know many data scientists or like many people who are actually working in artificial intelligence or machine learning, or even who has written a long code, a legacy code since last 5-10 years. They need to require what exactly coverage is, so they can use that coverage. So here you can check where the control is going, how many statements are there, how many statements missing, what is the coverage percentage, what is the missing, line by line. So you can check this report. So that is one of the finest functionality provided by PyTest. Coverage we have check, skip, exfil. Let's go to slide. So there are other PyTest plugins as well which are very famous nowadays, which are like PyTest Django and PyTest BDD. So using those, there are if you want to test some UI functionality in lot of different manner, and in some um, particular cases we have to check using Django, then PyTest Django is a plugin. So many of the you are not aware about Django, so I'm not demoing Django, and we have also have PyTest BDD, behavioral driven development PyTest plugin. So we have next session of BDD over here, maybe. Then definitely next time we can check about PyTest BDD. So basically it's PyTest provide a framework wise functionality which will actually helpful to check different scenarios in Django working fine or not, or different scenarios in BDD is working fine or not. So our next section is basically how we can integrate PyTest with DevOps tools. Nowadays, everyone is using DevOps tools. Since last 2-3 years, we are moving to cloud, etc., containerization, Kubernetes, Docker, etc., etc. So these are the modules which we can actually use to integrate with different DevOps tools and check and test the scenarios of different DevOps, different cloud. Okay, so PyTest Ansible is a plugin which actually we can check the scenarios in Ansible. So Ansible is basically a configuration and management tool we can use to configure and manage different cloud, different containers, etc., etc. So a lot of functionality by Ansible. Ansible playbook is basically like we are written a code in a playbook. Playbook is basically code of Ansible, and we can run we can do lot of functionality of Ansible using a single playbook, a single code at high level. So PyTest Ansible playbook is also a plugin which we can use to check the functionality and scenarios mentioned in playbook using this particular PyTest Ansible playbook. PyTest Terraform. Terraform is widely using a tool. It's a DevOps tool mainly used for infrastructure management, provision, etc. for AWS, Azure, or anything, any cloud, or anything you want to like manage the infrastructure, any infrastructure you want to manage. Then uh, Terraform is a tool which people are using, and PyTest Terraform using which we can check the functionality, test the code of Terraform. Similarly, for PyTest, we have PyTest AWS, we have PyTest Azure pipelines, uh, basically depending on different clouds we have. And we also have PyTest Docker. So using PyTest Docker, we can check the functionality of Docker exactly executing. So these are basically high-level PyTest two plugins which we can use. Maybe in future, if I will get a chance, then definitely I can show the demo and I can talk about these particular useful plugins which can we integrate with DevOps tools. So now we have limit of time, so we are moving ahead. So what is a summary exactly we have seen in this session? Till now I am just repeating so that you will actually get like remember, or we will you can go home and check whether it's working or not. So we check installation of PyTest. We are checking how test file we are able to identify, how to write test functions, how to test functions, how to test all the functions using PyTest. What is the -v option? Then using file name, how to run particular file name, particular code. Then definitely substring option using -k, marker option using -m option. Then definitely about we have showed a demo about PyTest fixers. Then how to access multiple fixers. This is one of the functionality. We also checked parameterize, how to provide parameters to the code. Then exfailing, skipping, and maximum max fail, how to stop the execution, how to run the test parallelly, and then generating reports. So that is how we have checked the uh, in this session. So congratulations, you have learned many things in PyTest. Now we are talking about extend the boundaries of PyTest. So till now many people are using a PyTest only for like uh, testing few functionalities. So only QA engineers, testers are using. But if you check how I need to talk about extend boundary is basically like, so if you check pytest -h, so you can check there are a lot of commands like sub commands, more than 200. Lot of options are providing by pytest. So you can explore it and you can check it. Uh, people are testing only small functions using PyTest, but we can check multiple functions, classes, we can check UI functionality, we can check databases, we can check APIs, we can check microservices, we can check cloud. As I told, we can there are modules related to cloud, containers, etc., etc., configuration management tools, infrastructure management tools. So even if you are developer, even if you are QA engineer, even if you are DevOps, even if you are doing cloud formation, even if you are maintenance engineer, there are a lot of scenarios you need to check on daily basis that this particular scenario is working or not. And definitely there are a lot of modules provided by PyTest, and you can definitely use it. Even if even though even nowadays the people who are working in artificial and machine learning in robotics field, they have to just change a particular few things and they need to check it again because they are like experimenting things. So that time as well they are using PyTest to just check code for code is working or not. And also PyTest have we can like integrate with Jenkins as well for continuous integration, continuous delivery. So there are a lot of use cases where we can actually use the PyTest. And definitely it's like a thinking, like it's your maturity, it's your way, it's your thought process where exactly you can check PyTest is working, and it will help all the software engineers to make their life very easy. So as I mentioned, even for developer, Q engineer, DevOps, cloud formation engineer, maintenance engineer, etc., etc. So I guess yes, that's pretty much from my side. What is the next slide? Next slide is thank you everyone for listening it. I actually want you to share the knowledge with your friends, colleagues, etc. So sharing knowledge also helps us to improve our knowledge. So this is my email ID. Whatever the questions you have, you can directly write me through that email. And this is my blog, anandprakashtandale.wordpress.com, which will actually helpful blog. I have written uh, some solutions for different problem I had faced, or any new software engineer student or new software engineer will face. Will definitely helpful for this. So you can write down to my ask to you can ask my you can ask questions to me using that WordPress and email. Okay. So thank you everyone. Thank you organizers who actually give me chance to share my knowledge. Thank you everyone. Thank you. Let's
Vishal, my screen is visible, right?
Yes, Bhavin, it is.
Okay, okay. Yeah, and this was really great talk. I mean, I have never explored these basics of PyTest. I just used to run PyTest and then test used to be already written, or I just used to add new tests to it. But yeah, this was great. We had a few questions. So Abhijit was asking if we can pass on hyphen k. We pass hyphen k, right? Can we pass regular expressions to it? Uh, yeah. Maybe we
Anand,
shall.
Anand,
Yeah,
I
we
guess
shall or
you
Anand
are
both can on
mute,
mute.
I guess. Could you please answer that? I'm not sure about that query. Maybe we can move
Uh-huh.
on to second. I guess Nikhil had given an answer to that question, right?
Yeah, but
So
yeah,
what
I
was
was.
that? Um,
So what he
so
said is hyphen k try to match the content in your test IDs. So I'm not sure what is a test ID. Do you know, Vishal?
no, no, I am not sure
Okay,
about that.
okay, okay. Yeah, so what he's saying, it tries to match the IDs.
Hmm.
Yeah. And he says ID consists of your test name and parameterized params. Okay. So basically, it needs to match against the name.
Okay.
Next, we had Chandan was asking how we can debug failing tests. So let's say we can use direct PDB inside test, or how that can be done. I guess that should be enough, right? I mean, you add PDB there and you just jump into the
Right, the exact location.
execution path. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Maybe in the meantime, Anand can check what is happening with his microphone. Um,
I guess other questions were answered in the chat. So I had one
yeah.
question to Anand. So Anand, is there any reporting tool which can be easily integrated with PyTest?
So I guess you
Mhm.
can use the coverage. So this is Devendra, by the way. The coverage output that you can use actually generates reports. It can generate HTML reports, or there are many visualization tools that you can use to visualize the coverage output basically.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
So I was aware about this Allure reporting, but I was just wondering that is there any other GUI tool which can be used for reporting?
Yeah, basically the coverage output is kind of universal. That's what I understood.
Okay.
And you can use different tools to visualize that.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So there was one question. When we use PyTest instead of unit test, as a unit test comes inbuilt with Python and handles a lot of boilerplate code, which PyTest does not do. Okay. So yeah, so Nikhil answered that in chat. So what he is saying is unit tests provide us option related to testing, and better to use it for unit testing or component level testing. But PyTest as a overall gives you more functionality to do more stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what distinguishes both of them. And
Yeah.
I usually
Also,
use
yeah.
this unit test for my unit test uh, code or my CI test. I never use
Mhm.
PyTest. By the way, it has great compatibility with Selenium. So if you're doing GUI test and
Mhm.
all, then PyTest is a great way to go ahead.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Also, they had a good discussion in chat. If someone is watching this live stream later, they can uh, just quickly open the chat and see what they had discussed. But yeah. Yeah, Anand is also giving responses to the questions, so that is cool. Chandan also said that you can, to debug test, you can just simply import pytest and then do pytest.setTest. So that is something new. Yeah. Cool. That's all we had, I guess. Anything you want to add, Vishal, from your experience or anything?
I haven't used PyTest extensively,
That
but
much.
the features like fixtures and all, which is an added advantage to PyTest, I might want to use this framework in my later test.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
apart from this, I just wanted to make a note of the Hangout room. Maybe Bhavin, you can.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So at the end, we will be having an open video call room. The link is in the description. We will also post it in the chat also, so that you can hop in. We can discuss. You can discuss with speakers and all. So we'll definitely we'll shortly open it after Devendra's talk, which is the next one.
Okay. Should we get started with the next talk?
Yeah, definitely. So we have Devendra with us, and he will be talking about behavioral driven test development. And yeah, over to you. In the meantime, you can share the screen. I will stop my screen share.
Okay. Let me. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Devendra, it's visible.
Okay, cool. I'm keeping the chat window open, so if people want to ask me anything,
Yes.
they can ask me. I don't have a multi-monitor setup right now, but yeah.
Yeah, this
So-
is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So hello everyone. My name is Devendra. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Avoma, and I'm going to talk today on behavior-driven development, which is sort of an extension of. So we sort of saw the testing framework or how to execute a unit test, integration test using PyTest, and sort of the behavior-driven development is sort of an extension of of the testing. It's another testing methodology, I would say. And it helps sort of like similar to like test-driven development that some people follow. This is like a behavior-driven development. So let's see what it is, and then we can execute some code as well, right? So what is behavior, driven development? So this is the definition that I've found out on the internet. So it's a software development process to drive collaboration between business development and QA teams. So the idea being that so typically you have some product owner, maybe it's a product manager, a product manager, or the client, you can say sometimes, right, depending upon what context you're talking about. And they have some idea in their head. They talk to the customer, they talk to the users to figure out what actually needs to get built, right? And then typically they create some documentation around it. Hey, this is the requirement that we have, and then there's back and forth between the developers, the product owners, and the testing team. And this happens over, I don't know, depends upon, like, you might have some use cases. If you're following some agile methodology, you might break it down into stories, and this is what is expected of the stories. And then the developer and the testing team sort of work independently. They write their own test cases, and then they present it to the product owner, right? But what happens is that unless you have sort of a common spec between all of these three folks, things get lost in translation, or there's a lot of back and forth. And so what behavior-driven development does is it sort of ties, all of these three things together. It ties the product owner, the tester, and the developer in sort of one common framework. And that's how you can have this one document, and you collaborate on that one document, and you use the same document for the testing purposes as well as when you're doing some development. And then the product owner also uses the same document, to document new features or understand what's going on, right? So I'll give an example of what this is about. And so, the way that this is the kind of a document that you sort of collaborate on, right? So it's called a feature file. So it's sort of you build you sort of develop multiple feature files. Let's say for each feature that you implement in the product. And this sort of serves as the single. This is the single piece of document which is used to discuss the requirements as well as the testing scenarios in one shot, right? So there's no separate document which you use for documenting the requirements. You use sort of the same file for specifying the requirements as well as testing, right? And behind the scenes, what happens is that if you sort of implement this correctly, you can tie in a testing framework behind and attach it to this document, and you can execute the scenarios. You can sort of make this as an executable requirements kind of a document which sort of embeds executable requirements, right? So think of it as there are different scenarios that are there, and then you execute each of the scenario as a test case, right? So each scenario is a test case. Now, I've taken this example from the polls app, which is there in the Django tutorials, and sort of I'll show you the code behind this as well. But the basic idea is that you just have one document that you use while discussing the requirements, and then the developers and the testing team actually write test cases to make to execute this as as separate test cases, right? So that's the idea behind BDD. Feel free to ask me any questions if you have, or I can go ahead and then we can come back and talk about this. So instead of writing your test cases as the executable code that we see in PyTest, the idea behind BDD is that you write your test cases using natural language, and then you sort of you add sort of functionality to that natural language to make it more executable, right? So that's the basic idea behind BDD. So this is you have to sort of write the specification in a certain language, and that sort of markdown language, almost I would say, is called Gherkin. So it's a Gherkin syntax. And it's the file basically has a certain number of keywords that you need to use. It's like features, scenario examples, steps, and steps of given, when, then, and then there's some advanced functionality on background and data tables. So in this case, again, there's a specific feature which we are talking about, which is settings for the polls that we conduct. There's some background. In this case, there is no background, and then there are scenarios, right? So the scenario is that questions published in future are not visible to the end user, right? And then there's this keyword, right? So given a question with some certain text and has a published date which is 5 days from today. So when the user visits the detailed page, then the user gets a page not found error, right? So this is sort of a English language description which the product owner can sort of understand, right? So product owners or product managers, while they do understand the nitty-gritties of the code in many cases, but not necessarily that they will understand they'll be able to parse essentially a PyTest unit or test cases, basically, right? So this is the typical format, and this add detail is basically a tag that we have attached to a specific scenario, and I'll get back to tags as well, right? So yeah, that's the basic syntax behind basically this Gherkin feature file, and you can develop obviously multiple feature files you can implement for each and every for any feature that you have. So I'm going to talk about why is it why follow this methodology? Why not just write your test cases using PyTest and go just use that, right? So the main thing is that it's explaining different use cases and scenarios is difficult, right? So you need to have this common language between the product owner and then the developer and the testing team, right? And unless you have this common language between these three groups, typically you will miss out on certain details, or if you even need clarification on certain details, then it's difficult, right? The second main thing that I've seen is that refactoring test cases is difficult. So once you have a complicated test case, and you need to make a change to that particular test case, it is very difficult to understand what is happening in a particular test case and then modify it appropriately, right? Again, like for simple products or simple simple unit test cases, it's easy. But if you let's say you have a complicated integration test case involving third-party systems, there's a lot of setup that's involved before you can sort of test out a certain piece of code. And if something changes in between, you sort of need to go in and understand like the exact all setup steps, and encode is sometimes difficult versus like understanding natural language. The third thing is like responding to support issues is difficult. This typically I've seen happens where you implement a feature and then 6 months down the line there's a support issue that comes in. Hey, does this work in this particular way or not? And it's while you have written some support articles, and all of those details in there, still sometimes you need to go back and refer to the actual code to understand what is happening in a particular case. And it sort of is easier if you have this sort of documentation in there, because it sort of provides, even like for the support staff, it's easy for them to actually go through it and understand it, and even respond to support issues on their own, right? No common language between requirements and tests. I think I've covered this already. Requirements are not updated after features have been built. Again, this is basically what I've seen is that you have the product owners wants to implement a lot of features, but then they come in and say the team comes in and scopes, okay, for V1 this is the only thing that we're going to deliver, right? And so then unless you sort of cut that out and create a separate and maintain that, hey, this is the V1 feature that we have implemented, and we're going to implement V1.1 later on, it's sort of difficult to know what exactly has been built and what has not been built, right? And then it also happens that when you're building the feature, you sort of change the requirements as well, right? And so then the document does not get updated. So the initial requirement document does not get updated, right? So if you have sort of this executable requirements, then it's always be correct, and exactly what has been built. All right. Lastly, I think you need to document features in order to write support articles. Again, if you have this sort of the requirements document, then you can use it, easily pass it on to a technical writer, or even you can sort of write test cases, support articles based upon this feature file. So I have a question. It says, is scope of Gherkin totally different than PyTest? I think it's good for acceptance testing. Again, it's not necessarily, I would say, the scope is different. You can actually write, you can sort of test anything in there with BDD as well. I think where it finds most useful is any place where there is sort of a user-driven behavior, or there's even a system-driven behavior that you want to test out, where user does something and then something else happens, and then you want to test out some output to the user, for example. That's where I feel it's much more useful versus let's say you want to test case a particular algorithm, then PyTest might be much more easier. So, and as I mentioned, once you sort of start writing complicated test cases, even understanding what's going on becomes difficult. So it is it's much more easier to sort of use the natural language to look at what's exactly happening. I'll give an example of this as well. So yeah, I mean, what basically, I'll give you an example of a complicated test case that we've written at Avoma and sort of drive home this point in a second. Okay, I think I have it on slide 7. So basically, Gherkin is, what it ties together is automated testing, executable specifications, and living documentation, right? So the document is executable. It's basically, whatever you write in there needs to tie to an executable line of code, right? Each of the steps that we mentioned. It's actually documents how the system actually behaves. So if you write something in there and if the system actually does not behave accordingly, it will throw an error, similar to like when you write execute a test case. And again, it's executable specification. So it's like you're running that file as a test case, basically, right? Some resources, I'll share the slides as well, so you can sort of look those up. So here is Nikhil, a sample feature file that we have at Avoma. So this is a real sort of file that we have, and you can sort of think of it as like it's for acceptance testing. But actually, this is a file that I created. I already have an existing test case for this, but I sort of moved over it to this Gherkin syntax, just because it was very hard to understand what exactly happens, what's exactly happening in the system, especially as you get more and more complicated scenarios, right? So in this case, for example, there is a specific setup, okay, right, where like certain users exist in the system. They have different roles. They have different, different permissions and all of those things. And then, you sort of do something like, okay, when a meeting is shared, what exactly is happening, who has access, who does not have access. So it becomes fairly complicated once you have these complex scenarios that you want to test. And with this, it is actually easier to understand versus like the code for setting this up. It sort of works in there, right? It's easier to parse for everyone when you're talking about requirements, as well as when you're executing test cases, or if you want to update a specific test case or a specific scenario. It's much easier to change this rather than like going in the code and understanding what's there, right? So I think Parag has a question: is BDD scalable when it is used for enterprise products? I mean, like, scalable in what sense? I mean, it's definitely scalable. You don't have to use it for everything. You can use it for a part of the functionality that you want to get it under tested. Maybe it's like the user behavior driven functionality, right? So it's not like you have to wholesale adopt this entire approach. You can just say, hey, these are the few modules that I want to really test out using this functionality. You can even say, okay, this new feature that we want, or a new module that you want to test, and you can just use that. You can just use an adopt methodology for testing that particular module, right? So BDD with Django, and I'm going to jump in the code in a minute. So the way that you can implement this is, or the way that we have implemented it is, we use a library called as Behave, which supports BDD execution in Python, and then there's another library, Behave Django, which provides a Django integration, basically for it just adds a Django app which provides some management commands. The feature files that I showed you are actually written under apps features directory, and then the execution steps are added to the feature steps. The behave RC lists paths, and the environment.pack controls the environment. So here is the library, and I'll just switch over to the console to show how this actually works in practice. So I don't know how many folks are how many folks know the polls app? But I can just go over the polls app. This is the sample app that you see in the Django tutorial page. So if you follow like the Django's official tutorial, this is the app that they built. So like you have the it's basically like you conduct a survey, right? So that's the polls app that's there. And then it just consists of two database models. There's a questions that you ask to the users, and then you sort of have multiple choices for a given question, and then you can sort of vote. So you can just have the vote. And what you can do is you can. So here is the test case that's officially again written using the standard Django test case functionality. So I mean, this is the test case, and again, it's like pretty simple. It's like test was published recently, and so these are the test cases that have been written. They're very similar to what we saw with PyTest, right? I'm just going to show how there's a existing test case that's written in. So these are the two test cases that are written in the standard format, and then how it gets how the sort of written in using Gherkin, right? So you can see like there's like this test future question, and then the idea being that there's a published date associated with each and every question, pub date. And then if it is in future, then you cannot view essentially that question. But then once once the server date rolls over to that particular date when it is to be published, then it's available to everyone. So basically this is the functionality that's there, and this is the test case that's done. It basically just sets it to like the question in future, and then tries to get it, and then it results in a 404, and then a past question is available, right? And on the right hand side, you can see the the feature file that I've written for this, and it says basically questions published in future not visible, and like given a question called as future question with a particular text, and has a published date set to 5 days from today. When the user visits the detail page for a future question, then the user gets a page not found error. And similarly, when you have questions published in the past are visible to the user, then the same thing, right? And what you can see is like you can sort of use this the right hand side feature file as again like it's a natural language, so you can talk about it, you can discuss about it, whether it makes sense, does not make sense. All of those things are possible, right? And how you execute it is yeah. So I've you basically this is a management command which says manage.py and it goes in and executes it, and then it gives you like, hey, this feature has passed. There are two scenarios which have passed, none have been skipped, and yeah, how much time. So it's like executing a test case that we saw previously with PyTest. Similarly, it's just an execution of this file, right? And how this all works together is that you need to connect essentially for each of this lines of each of the statements. You need to connect a function behind it which goes and executes it, right? So if you go to steps and this poll steps, you can see this is like a question create. So like this is like the converting the natural language to actual code, and there's no AI which does this right now. Maybe with GPT-3 or someone like that, you can automatically in future create this. But right now, what we are doing is basically just templatizing this this text, right? So question with this thing. So this is a given statement. It gets matched to this one, and then it creates a question, right? So I'm sort of can we achieve DRI and BDD? Yeah, this is exactly what this is achieving, right? So you just have one function for this, and you've parameterized it, so it is sort of, we don't repeat ourselves, right? So this is the same function which will get executed for this statement as well as this statement, right? So the same code will get executed. Again, like I've sort of tried to make it a little bit this thing, like has published date set to a certain date from today. This is the same thing. It just sets the published date, right? So this is what connects basically the feature file to the testing sort of functionality that's there, right? So instead of writing test cases, you need to now, and this is additional work. Nothing is free, right? I mean, the cons of of BDD is that you need to sort of understand all of this and build this feature file, and then you need to sort of write all of these functions, and you need to sort of there's an additional overhead of like each independent line needs to get needs to be implemented independently, right? So you need to sort of think in those terms. I think for people who are from the testing background, this is sort of similar thing. I think that gets executed in any case that they work on, but as compared to writing just a plain test case, this is more work for sure. But it comes with additional advantages that I just talked about, right? And yeah, so basically these are the steps that that get executed when when the scenarios are run, and it sort of achieves the dry principle. So we can definitely reuse all of the steps in different modules based upon you can sort of also use them across modules if needed, right? So that's the idea behind BDD. Okay, so that's. I'll just show a few more files that to work with the integration. You can follow the official documentation, but I can show basically how what the structure that we have. So we have a new folder called as features, and inside this feature there is like this whole detail.feature, which is the feature file that's there. And inside the steps directory, we have the steps, and these are the steps that which execute the test cases. Environment.py, basically you can sort of say before every scenario set some variables, and or before every test case, or after every test case, if there's some teardown code, we can sort of implement it over here. And the other file that we have is .behaveRC, which just gives the paths where the feature files reside. You can keep them anywhere. I like to keep them in each and every app, the feature files for a specific app. Sometimes there are like cross-functional things. You can sort of keep a separate folder. There's also some auto-discovery mechanism, which is there, but I sort of could not get it to work reliably. So I've sort of I'm not using that auto discovery mechanism. So yeah, so this is how we execute test cases. You can also write add some tags, and this will sort of execute only test cases with a given tag. So I mean, x equal to it will run the same two things, but you can. This is especially useful if you say you're working on a particular feature and just want to test, quickly run some test cases against that particular feature, and that feature resides in multiple places. Then you can sort of just use the tagging functionality. The second area where this is particularly useful is if you're working on a particular scenario which is failing, and you just want to work on that particular scenario, then you can just add a WIP tag. And then you can just say, at WIP, and it will only execute that particular, only that particular scenario, basically. Where do we keep setup before the test functions? I think I've again mentioned it. There's an environment.py that controls it. So, and then it has a before scenario. So before each and every scenario, it can set things up. And this context variable is passed around to each and every step. And then I think there's also an after scenario, before a step, before scenario, before a feature. And so you can sort of configure the setup or teardown functions in that particular area. Yeah, and there's one more command, which is the steps catalog. I can talk. It shows you all the steps that have been implemented. So these are the steps that are there. It's especially useful if you want to just look at all the steps and maybe try to grab a certain step which already been implemented or not. So that's where it's more useful. It will also, if you try to implement something which is not executed, then user gets abc, let's just say, and if you try to execute this one, it will show an error, right? So you have not implemented this. You need to add this function basically, right? Okay. So that's how you execute, the BDD test cases. Some additional pitfalls or FAQs. Logs need to be disabled. Behave automatically prints logs for filling test cases. This was an artifact of, I think, how we had configured our logging system. Typically, I think if you follow the standard pattern, I think this is still okay. So if it automatically prints the logs for filling test cases, which is great while while we are debugging. Steps need to be properly imported. So again, this is an artifact of the auto discovery not working. So what you have seen is that the first path, like the path polls features, this is where all the steps need to be properly imported. So if you have for example, multiple feature directories, you need to create something like all steps.py and just import all of those steps in that particular file. For debugging, you can use PDB, but you just need to set the std out to correctly, because since it sort of takes over the std out for printing bunch of things, and so you just need to make that one particular change. Use tags to it as a single scenario or a bunch of scenarios or a failing scenario or a work in progress scenario. Yep, that's it. That's all that I had. Open for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Devendra. So, yeah, it was a great walkthrough over BDD framework. So, I had a few of questions. So, first one would be the Cucumber framework. So, could you just share any insight about Cucumber framework? Have you used it, or?
I think Cucumber framework is very similar. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's Gherkin is sort of, I think, very closely related to Cucumber, or is it a rename of Cucumber? I think the main difference is that they started with the Ruby world, right? I think even this whole Behave framework is sort of a port from a Ruby framework that's present, right? So it's the exact same, as far as I know, it's the exact same thing. Gherkin is just sort of, I think, renamed because Gherkin is also kind of a cucumber, actually, right? Or sort of a vegetable in that this thing. So I think they're very closely related. Yeah. So if you actually Google, a lot of it is cucumber or Gherkin, sort of
exactly
the same things that are there.
So if I Google about BDD, the first thing it shows up is the Cucumber framework. So that's what I happen to ask you this thing. So okay,
Yeah.
that was one thing. The other thing was why BDD? Like as you mentioned, a use case like it's great for user acceptance testing. But sorry for the noise. So
No problem.
if you have to write two steps, like you have to write the feature file and the code, so how is there any way to decrease this overhead, or why would a QE or organization would adopt this framework to be used in its production environment if there are two things to be maintained?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, right, it's mainly about, I can give you like an example, right? So when you're talking, you need to create the documentation, or people create the documentation when you're creating requirements, right?
Okay.
And so there's a lot of back and forth that goes between the product owner and the developers and the testing team, right? Hey, should it be this way? Oh, what about this particular use case? And so on. So there's a lot of back and forth that happens typically, right? And unless you have this common sort of document that's there, you can sort of create a separate, I don't know, story file or some, all of those things. But uh, if you have this executable sort of feature file, then it is it's definitely helps in clarifying things, right? Between they exactly know what they're getting, right? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that as you write more and more complicated test case. So this is not the most complicated test case that's there even in this particular case, right? It's like I have like test cases which span more than this, right? And it's fine when you sort of develop them, but once you sort of you need to refactor them after like 6 months and add something new to it. It becomes very difficult to recognize what exactly is happening in the code,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And then the third thing is that with code, even though you might have some standard patterns, different developers or different even testing people will implement it differently, implement the test code differently, right? And so as developers, when you have to sort of work with different ways in which things have been set up and all of those things, then it becomes harder to even understand what's happening in the test case. So with this, it sort of is bringing that sort of same personas, same setup, same sort of terminology to a certain extent in that as like sort of the facade for the for the testing framework, right? So that's the basic advantage that I see in this.
It's a pretty good justification, by the way. Yeah, so to show this test results to a novice or for management people or for reporting stuff, it's a great tool or a framework to be used. So yeah, that's a great thing. By the way, I pitched this question because I have created my own framework. So this is like a publicity of my own framework. So I have written a robot framework. WT robot is the framework name. So in that you just have to write a YAML file, which would be somewhat same like your feature file, and that's it. You don't have to code the rest part. So maybe people can look into it later on. By the way, Parag has also mentioned about the robot framework for the BDD support in the
Yes.
chat section. So yeah, that's also a great framework to be used. Okay.
Yes, definitely the robot framework has support for this. You can do a lot of things in this I've not sort of covered. You can also connect it with Selenium and actually do like front end based testing as well with this. So yeah, even all of those things are possible actually with robot as well as I think with behave as well. I think there's one more question. Can we pass more than one string inputs to the function? We connect to the scenarios like overloading. I'm not so sure about this thing. I don't think you can do it the way that I think it happens in Python typically. But I'll have to check and see if we can overload it. Probably not, I would say. But yeah, I'll have to test it out. Okay. I'll stop sharing. I guess. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. And yeah, any more questions, you can just email me, or I think we're going to go to a breakout room, so you can ask me over there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Devendra. It was interesting. This was new for me and it was nice. Let me quickly share my screen. So this time we will be having a breakout room where our attendees can also hop in and we can discuss. Just before that, let me just do few announcement, and I will post these links as well. So basically, first of all, thank you for attending the meetup. And yeah, we are on Twitter with name PythonPune. You can join the mailing list, which is on Google Groups. You can also join us on Freenode IRC by name Python Pune. And we also have a Telegram group, but we usually don't I recommend everyone to use Telegram at all. So basically, if you can join the IRC, that is great. And by the way, these two are bridged, so you don't have to worry about any of this. So if someone is using IRC, they will be able to talk to you via on the Telegram group as well. So both worlds are connected together. And yeah, thank you, Devendra. Thank you, Anandprakash, for great talks and all the attendees who were asking questions. And this was a really interactive session today. To take it further, we will be having this breakout room where everyone can join. So let me just quickly post link to this on the chat, and we'll soon end the live stream. So yeah, see you there. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so there is another announcement we wanted to do, which I missed. Sorry for that. So basically, PyCon India's call for proposals is open. So you can go ahead and submit your talk. And we also run few exercises kind of stuff. So whenever there is a next Python Pune meetup and you have submitted a talk, you can just present that to our community as well. So that way you can practice it as well. So I'm posting that link as well in the chat. Yeah.
Just to make a note, if this Jitsi Meet break hangout room link is not visible in the chat, it's also mentioned in the description, so people can find it over there. Thanks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's see. Maybe someone can check if it's working. I'm just posting a few links so that we have those in the chat. People can just join those. And once done, we'll end the stream there. Okay, sir. Let's join the breakout room and discuss with everyone how they found the meetup.